In June 2020, the auditors at Ernst Young made a phone call to track down the cash reserves of Germany's most celebrated financial technology company. They were looking for $1.9 billion. This money was supposed to be sitting in escrow accounts in the Philippines, verifying years of reported profits. The trustee in the Philippines picked up the phone and delivered a single devastating sentence. That money was never here. With that single confirmation, a corporate giant valued at $28 billion was placed on a path to complete insolvency. 8 days later, it would be gone. The investigation into this missing cash leads to a larger question: how a company built entirely on fiction secured the approval of Europe's most sophisticated regulators and accountants for 2 decades. Wirecard began in Munich in 1999. Its early business model was strictly pragmatic, processing payments for online gambling and adult entertainment websites. The big banks refused to touch these transactions, leaving a highly profitable gap in the market. The architect of their expansion was an Austrian executive named Markus Braun. He cultivated the image of a quiet, technically brilliant visionary, promising investors that Wirecard would become the invisible layer powering global digital commerce. By September 2018, that promise appeared fully realized. Wirecard was added to the DAX 30, Germany's premier stock index. To make room, the index removed Commerzbank, a financial institution that had operated for 150 years. Global capital followed the prestige. Institutional investors flooded in, including a €900 million commitment from SoftBank. The valuation peaked at $28 billion. Politicians pointed to Wirecard as definitive proof that Germany could compete with Silicon Valley. At its peak, the company was the ultimate symbol of the nation's technological future. While Munich and Frankfurt celebrated, journalists at the Financial Times had been scrutinizing the company's filings. Reporter Dan McCrum spent years mapping out a network of Wirecard's business partners in Asia. Wirecard claimed to use third-party acquirers across Asia to process transactions. Money supposedly moved from customers through these partners, booking immense profit on Wirecard's ledger. But when McCrum investigated, physical addresses led to empty homes. The partners and their revenue existed nowhere else. Wirecard functioned as a mechanical accounting loop, designed to invent numbers that satisfied the expectations of the market. When the Financial Times published these findings, the German financial establishment was forced to choose between investigating a national champion or attacking the messengers. The federal regulator, BaFin, filed a criminal complaint against the journalists. They accused the reporters of market manipulation, theorizing they were working with short sellers to drive down the stock price. In early 2019, BaFin went further, issuing an explicit ban on the short selling of Wirecard stock. It was a direct intervention to protect the company's valuation from market skepticism. The institution chartered to protect investors from corporate deception was now actively functioning as the company's strongest layer of defense. The protective shield held until April 2020. Under intense pressure, Wirecard commissioned an independent KPMG audit. Months later, KPMG released a report stating they simply could not verify the third-party revenue. Cornered by the KPMG findings, Ernst Young finally refused to sign Wirecard's financial statements. When the market opened, the stock dropped 60% in a single session. Markus Braun resigned and was quickly arrested. Meanwhile, Chief Operating Officer Jan Marsalek, the executive who managed the fictional Asian partners, disappeared on a private jet to Minsk, eventually fleeing into Russia. The collapse was absolute. In 8 days, the most valuable financial technology firm in Europe filed for insolvency, leaving a $28 billion crater in its wake. Braun and Marsalek executed the fraud by forging bank balances and fabricating contracts. But that localized criminality does not explain how they survived in plain sight for 2 decades. This flowchart illustrates the structural failure of the auditors. Ernst Young approved the accounts for over 10 years because the audit became a routine of checking boxes. Wirecard supplied the documents confirming the third-party revenue, and EY certified them, creating a closed loop of compliance without independent verification. The regulators suffered from a similar institutional blindness. To accept that Wirecard was a massive criminal enterprise would require the German government to admit that their entire financial oversight apparatus had failed. The cost of that admission was deemed too high. Wirecard had become too important to question, creating a vast, quiet space where the deception could operate untouched. Markus Braun is currently standing trial in Munich, insisting he was deceived. Jan Marsalek remains an international fugitive with established ties to Russian intelligence. The thousands of investors who trusted the German regulatory stamp lost everything. A fraud of this scale survives through a specific environment, one where the individuals and institutions capable of exposing the truth have deep structural incentives to look the other way. The architecture of Wirecard's collapse exists across the global fintech industry. This specific firm simply ran out of cash before the fiction could be sustained any longer.